Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys for a little bit about why the deadlift is not just an overall fantastic strength builder, but an overall size builder, because that's a point that gets lost on a lot of people, and it's something a lot of people totally misunderstand and actually don't believe in. So hopefully I can change your mind in this video. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Alright, most people aren't going to debate that the deadlift is a fantastic strength builder. Full body strength builder. Trains most of the muscles in your body, makes you strong, trains you to use your body as one whole unit. And it's very, very functional. I mean, that's as basic as it gets all through human history of having to pick up something heavy off the ground to move it. That's a pretty normal movement for pretty much everyone in the world who's ever had to do any manual labor or even survive in any sort of society before we had a society where people could be sedentary. It's a very, very basic thing. And we're very good at it. There's a reason we're very strong at the deadlift. We're anatomically built very well to do the deadlift because it's something that's just been part of all of human history. We're strong at it. So, people will agree with that. They'll be like, okay, I get your point there, but it doesn't isolate anything. It's not the best exercise for most of the muscles that it works. It's not ideal stimulation of it. It doesn't work most of those muscles through their complete range of motion, which even you've said, Jason, is a useful tool for hypertrophy. Full range of motion training is useful for hypertrophy, but it isn't essential. And that's the point we want to get to. What people need to understand, muscle size that you gain from training is about cumulative fatigue over the course of the day, the week, the month. It's about that cumulative workload that muscle's subjected to, the fibers, the muscle fiber recruitment that happens over time. It's not just about that one exercise. No one out there realistically has just one exercise that they do for a body part. Most people who are chasing size, at least. People for strength, they'll do that because they might have specificity of training. They have a sport-specific reason they focus so heavy on one exercise or movement because it has tremendous carryover to something they do in a competitive endeavor. People who are chasing size usually have a bit more variety in their training because they want to make sure that the muscles do get stimulated well. They don't trust just one exercise to get it done oftentimes. That's oftentimes the line of reasoning that people use who use more than one exercise for a muscle. A lot of people use a chest press and some sort of fly for their chest. They don't just have one exercise. I'm not saying they couldn't get maximum growth off one exercise. You can, but people are looking for that cumulative fatigue, just making sure that muscle grows. Well, the deadlift works a lot of muscles in the body to a greater and lesser extent. Some of them, it is an absolutely tremendous stimulator. Some of them, it's a lesser stimulator, but here's the thing. It's about the cumulative work that a muscle is subjected to. And when you look at it from that perspective, and you look at a lot of different support muscles that the deadlift works that don't always get worked as effectively, you'll notice that people who deadlift heavy, when they turn to the side, they do tend to be a bit thicker. It adds a certain amount of thickness that isn't necessarily there for people who don't train the deadlift or train at least something comparable. And it's because of all the different support muscles that do get worked more than, say, when you just isolate certain major muscles. And we'll go into some of that in a second. But the other thing that the deadlift is really good at is because you're using very heavy weights and using a lot of different muscles, it tends to find the weak links in there. Out of any of the muscles that are used in the deadlift, if you've got a weak link, that muscle limits your strength on the deadlift. And if it limits your strength and you're forced to work that muscle more, it will grow faster usually to accommodate. It has to. And I'll give you the easiest example, one that people can identify with immediately. If you have really bad grip and you have really small forearms and you start deadlifting, what usually limits your deadlift work sets? Your grip. Your grip will affect how much you can deadlift. It will be your limiting factor. And if you don't use straps and you just keep deadlifting and keep working on it, what happens? Your forearms thicken up, right? Everyone who's tried this for long periods of time has learned this themselves. That's what happens. Your forearms thicken up and they get stronger and your grip gets stronger to accommodate because it's the weak link in your deadlift. It has to. Well, that can happen with other muscles in the exercise too, whether it's the mid-trap or the hamstring or anything else. And what you find with the deadlift, there's a lot of muscles that it works. And sometimes it can be the primary stimulator, depending upon a person's genetics. Someone like me, people say, what do you do for your calves? Because they'll see my calves. My calves are massive. I don't train my calves, I deadlift. But you know what? There are times when I deadlift, when I get DOMs in my calves afterwards. I feel my calves. When you guys have watched clips of me deadlifting heavy, my calves contract. My calves, gastrocnemius in my calf gets worked. Right? The deadlift works the hamstrings. Now, people will say, well, it doesn't work all three heads of the hamstring. No, it doesn't. It works two of the three heads of the hamstring. But you know what? That still adds a hell of a lot of size and thickness to the hamstring. Again, when you're talking about people's thickness from the side, you turn to the side. People who do deadlifts instead of just mostly squats, they have bigger hamstrings. They look thicker from the side. Same thing with the glutes. The glutes is probably the most stimulated muscle on the deadlift. Realistically, that is one of the biggest movers in it. And a lot of people say, well, my glutes don't get sore after deadlifting. Well, they don't have to, because glutes are big, strong, and powerful. They handle that load really well. They don't oftentimes get sore from the deadlift, but it is stimulating now. The spinal erectors, obviously, it is one of the most powerful exercises, greatest stimulating exercises for the spinal erectors. Again, if you want a strong lower back, deadlift will do it. How about your abs, your whole core? Everything through your core gets worked tremendously on the deadlift. Now, they have a stabilizing role, but that still causes them to gain strength and to get thicker. It can help build up your abs. Even if it's not the best exercise for it, it's not bad. It does a decent job of it. What else? How about your latissimus dorsi? Now, a lot of people say the lats can't possibly be worked on the deadlift. Look at the way they move. Actually, they play a massive stabilizing role, but how big of a role? How many people, first time they start deadlifting heavy, they get sore lats afterwards, or they get cramps in their lats? A lot of people complain about that. And I'm not saying EMG studies are the be-all, end-all, but look at Brett Contreras' research on the lats. In his research, he found, at least in the limited data that you can draw from EMG studies, and I want people to understand, they are not the be-all, end-all. They're not accurate enough to always tell you which exercise is better than another, but they can tell you if an exercise is being stimulated, if a muscle is being stimulated heavily, moderately, mildly, or not at all by an exercise. When he did studies on the deadlift, the deadlift stimulated the latissimus dorsi right up there with the levels that things like weighted pull-ups did in rows. It was up there in that same range. Now, some of his studies shows it might be the best, but again, that shows you the limits of EMG studies, because I don't think it's possible that it's the best. But even that data shows that it certainly lights up and has a lot of muscle fiber activity. It is recruiting muscle fibers all through the lats pretty heavily. So it is a good lat exercise. But it also works all those little smaller muscles around the lats. And that's the difference. When people train their back with just something like pull-ups, they build the lats up, but a lot of the little smaller muscles, like the thoracic erectors and the mid-traps and stuff, maybe don't get worked as much. And so their back isn't quite as thick. The deadlift will thicken all of that up because it works the mid-trap, the lower trap, the thoracic erectors, all those other muscles underneath the lats and in the middle there. It works those tremendously, and it will thicken them up, and it will make the back look thicker and fuller from the back and the side. It will thicken you up in that direction. But yeah, it works the traps and things also. How about the forearms? You bet. Tons of guys out there who do nothing but various pulling without straps have massive forearms. It tends to go with the territory. They're getting worked tremendously. It's a great forearm builder. As long as you're not using straps, and as long as you can adapt to the workload and get to where you can do the amount of workload you're trying to do without them, it will keep building them up. And I mean, even little bitty things that people don't think of, like the biceps. Now, I want to note here, I'm not saying the deadlift is a great bicep builder. It's not. But in novice lifters who are untrained, we have seen data out there over the years where they start deadlifting, and what happens? Just if they deadlift only, not even doing any other pulling work, nothing for their biceps grow a little bit. They don't grow a lot, but they grow a little bit. Well, if you're wanting your biceps to grow, if you had a big heavy exercise that's working a lot of other muscles like the deadlift, it might give them that little bit of extra stimulation they need. Not saying you should try to replace curls with it or weighted chin-ups. I don't want people to think that at all, but that goes back to the other point. The deadlift works so many muscles, even in stabilizing roles, that if those muscles are lagging, the deadlift might give them some of the extra attention that they need, even though they're taking a stabilizing role, that you recruit just a few more muscle fibers that maybe aren't getting recruited. Maybe you fatigued a lot of them doing your other direct work for those muscles, and the deadlift will go ahead and add that extra cumulative fatigue for the week that you need to help kind of push you forward and boost a little bit of growth. Because it works so many different little muscles all through the body, it actually can provide that role for several muscles without you even thinking about it. And that's one of the reasons that it makes it such a good overall size builder. It's not that it's a great exercise for a bunch of different muscles with working them through their full range of motion and are isolating them or anything. It's that so many muscles are forced to work in it that if any of those little muscles maybe are lagging a little bit, or they're the weak link in the exercise, they're going to be forced to thicken up a bit just to compensate, just because they are potentially limiting the exercise, and your body's going to have to thicken them up to catch up due to the workload you're subjecting them to through the deadlift. I'm not saying it can replace direct work for a lot of these body parts, but it might add just the extra workload that they need to give them that little bit of extra just that little bit of extra work that they need to start moving forward and break through a plateau, and to just add to your overall weekly workload. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.